Welcome to Genuine Gainz. I'm Meredith Mistro, and I'm here to help you find mental and physical wellness that feels true to you. Life can be overwhelming, and taking care of yourself shouldn't add to that stress. So whether you're seeking inspiration, practical tips, or just a little encouragement, you're in the right spot. We'll share real stories and resources to help you find your own path to wellness, one that fits your life and your goals. Let's make those genuine gains your way. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Just to set the scene, I am sitting here at 5:11 p.m. Wow, that's my birthday. Crazy. But I have a warm cup of coffee in front of me and am trying to get my energy up for this thing I have to do tonight. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Just to set the scene, I am sitting here at 5:11 p.m. Wow, it's my birthday. So special. Anyway, I have a warm cup of coffee in front of me, trying to gear up for something I have going on later tonight. I'm very nervous, to be honest about it. I am doing this thing that I've been seeing on Instagram called Time Left. I'm sure many of you have seen it or maybe done it, but it's basically a mystery dinner with 5 or 6 strangers from your area. I think they pair you with people around your age, a mix of guys and girls, totally different walks of life, industries, but you also have to take this personality test. So they tried to pair you with people who are kind of similar to you in some ways. Anyway, I don't know what all goes into it. This is my first time doing it. It's weekly, every Wednesday night they have these dinners, and as the date gets closer, you learn about your group, you learn where you're going, but I still basically know nothing. I just know that I have people in my group who work in a bunch of different areas and have a lot of different zodiac signs. That's something they gave us, and we're going to this restaurant that literally just got revealed to us this morning. So I am recording this episode before I go to that dinner tonight, and I need some coffee to prepare because it has been a long day. Yes, I've already had a lot of caffeine, but we all know by now that I have an addiction and I am doing nothing to stop it. And sometimes, honestly, I feel like this is the authenticity that we need to bring to the world because everyone out there is telling us we need to stop drinking caffeine or we need to watch it and it's bad for us. And that's all true. But sometimes you just can't. And I'm here to share my story because I believe that it's important as an addict to be able to speak up about the challenges in stopping your addiction. It's not easy, and the world likes to make us feel like it's just a switch we can flip, and things are just all better. But no, it's mentally taxing, it's physically taxing to try and give up something that you love so much. So I'm just not going to do it right now. And that's that. That is Coffee Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. Isn't that a thing? I don't know. Anyway, enough about coffee. I am here today to talk about self-care. Coffee is self-care to me, to be honest. So that's also why I'm not giving it up. But anyway, this is our third episode of the Self-Care Toolbox series. I am really excited about it. And I say that every episode. I've started noticing when I edit every single episode, at least twice in the beginning. I'm like, I'm really excited about today's episode. Like, shut up. We know. Anyway, that's how I talk to myself. So, in case anyone was wondering. I am, though, because we're actually getting into the nitty-gritty today of how to implement these self-care habits that I've been alluding to in the past 2 episodes. I want to take us today from that ideation stage to the implementation stage. And I also just want you to know that I'm obviously no expert in this. I'm doing this right here alongside you. I'm just going to be sharing today some mindset hacks that have really helped take me from just being in my head about self-care to actually putting it into practice. I wanted to wait to do this episode rather than just doing it right off the bat because I think this is the type of content that a lot of podcasts, a lot of social media influencers just latch onto and make the focus of their content is just how to do it, what you should do. And I know I've talked about this before, but I'm not really one who likes to operate like that. I want to be honest about how difficult it can be to just jump in and do these hard things. I want to be honest about the roadblocks that can get in the way. I want to share different thoughts and perspectives and ideas before I just get into, all right, so this is how you do it. And this is coming from someone who loves just executing and getting stuff done. So, yes, the very prescriptive focus works well with my brain, but I know that from a human perspective, it doesn't really work with a lot of us when it comes to actually changing our lives because we need to feel a little more related to, we need to feel like we're less alone and like, it's okay if it's hard to do this. So I want to again anchor there that I know this is not easy. And after today's episode, you might hear everything I say and still be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to implement self-care. I don't know if I want to. And I want you to know that's okay as well. I am trying to be very realistic about this. And that's why at the beginning of the series, I set the goal for all of us to just choose one new self-care practice to try by the end of the series. And there's a lot that goes into that goal. Number one is that we're just choosing one thing. We're not trying to change our entire life and do everything at once. Number two, we are trying that thing, which means we are not committing. You should never feel like you have to commit to self-care forever. If you feel stuck or forced into it, that's not actually self-care at all. So trying is the name of the game here. We're just, seeing how it feels, seeing where it fits into our life. That's kind of what we're looking for. And today I want to keep up that realistic approach as I go through ways to really start implementing whatever it is that you decide you want to try. I can't even talk. I'm like, whatever you want to try. I promise I'm okay. I'm just caffeined up right now. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. Oh my gosh. I really should not have just swallowed right into the mic. That is a choice, but there you go. That's your ASMR for the day. So let's actually start kind of with a little recap of the past 2 episodes, because again, I don't just want to jump straight in. I do want to acknowledge, again, number one, in my first episode, I went through one of the biggest roadblocks that I think gets in the way for so many of us when it comes to practicing self-care, and that is a lack of energy or motivation to just do it. I'm going to get more into that a little bit today as I get into other roadblocks that could prevent us from actually implementing self-care. But I started with that episode because I think that's at the crux of where so many of our issues lie. We just don't have energy. We don't have motivation. But that's why I created the second episode of the series to be a little bit more focused on possibilities and ideas and excitement, kind of getting that energy and motivation up for self-care by giving you ideas of what self-care could actually look like. So episode 2 was my master list of different self-care techniques that I've either tried, that I have heard about from some of you, that I've heard about from Google, because let's be real, I rely on Google for my entire life. I have no brain cells of my own. So that master list came from all of those sources. It was great. It made me really excited about self-care. And if you listen to that episode, hopefully it made you a little excited and sparked some energy in you as well. But now we're still here where we have these ideas, we have this reassurance that we're not alone and that it's hard, but we don't actually have the steps to implement self-care and to try it. So I'm going to go through what has worked for me and what I'm still working on to make it work. But let's kind of start with the list of ideas that I gave you in the last episode. If you remember, where I left it in the last episode was encouraging you to take note of which ideas I mentioned made you excited? Which ones sounded interesting? Which ones gave you energy? I think I even mentioned writing it down. So I'm going to reinforce that to start today's episode because I think before you can really implement, you have to choose what you want to implement. And this whole episode is going to be about how to choose. But I think the first and best step you can take to effectively choose is to write down everything that sounds interesting. So these can be things from my last episode, but they can also be things I didn't even say because chances are you've always kind of had different things you've wanted to do, whether it's a new hobby you've wanted to try or just the self-care practice that maybe you once did and got out of, but you know you like it. Just write down or keep it in your head if you really insist. But I would say take note in some way of everything that sounds exciting to you so that you have something to choose from. This can be considered your master list. It doesn't have to be as long as mine. It doesn't have to be identical to mine in any way, but it can be your master list. And that is really going to be the foundation from which you can choose and implement a self-care habit that works for you. So once you have that list, I know I make it sound so easy, like, oh, just choose, choose things that sound interesting. But once you have that list, I do think there are some steps you have to take to really effectively decide out of that list of things that sound interesting, what do you actually want to do and what's actually feasible to do. So the first thing I would recommend you look at is those roadblocks again. I know I mentioned lack of energy, lack of motivation as the biggest roadblock that has gotten in my way. But in this episode, I do want to share a few other common and very realistic roadblocks that many of us face that I think are important to think about. So maybe some of these will resonate with you. Maybe you can think of other roadblocks in your life that I don't mention. But in addition to your master list, I would recommend that you write down or that you think about all of the real roadblocks that you have getting in your way. And I also just want to say, when I say real roadblocks, I'm not just saying like physical things that you can tangibly point to and have as evidence. I think the world has made us think that we're in our head if we just don't want to do something, or like, we're overreacting or being over dramatic about, what a roadblock is. But in this case, I want you to write down or think about everything that is getting in your way. And it can be something that's just in your head. It can literally be that you think to yourself, I don't want to do this, or you can't get yourself off the couch after work to do anything. Those are very valid roadblocks, but I think society has us believing that they are not valid. In this case, in this episode, I'm just saying those are valid. Any roadblocks you have are valid. But to give you a little bit of a starting point, if you don't really know how to put them into words, here are a few roadblocks that I've either experienced or again have heard about from other people that have really gotten in the way, besides the lack of energy and motivation. A huge roadblock is literally time. And that sounds obvious, but I think it's, something that many of us overlook because we're just so used to our lives operating the way that they do. We go to work every day, we go to school every day. Some of us have multiple jobs, some of us have family obligations, relationships, health stuff going on. We all have things that take up our time. And some of us have more quote unquote free time than others, depending on how you want to define that. But time is probably, for me, right up there with a lack of energy and motivation. And a lot of times it's the cause of my lack of energy is that I simply am so busy during my days. I overload myself partly. Some of it is not in my control, but some of it is. But I don't have a lot of time for it. And so then whenever I do have time, I'm so tired that I just don't do anything. That's kind of how I see it. But for you, it might be something different, You might not have the energy problem as much, but you might just be literally swamped at work for 12 hours a day. And then it's like, okay, you got to be realistic and get sleep. So you can't be doing self-care all night. You know what I mean? So whatever it is for you, time is a huge one that I would really look into for yourself and see how it's affecting you, because I do think that's almost a universal one that affects all of us in some way. Other things are honestly, money. A lot of self-care practices do require money, but certainly not all of them. I do think, though, that some self-care practices that sound fun and interesting for a lot of people do require some kind of investment, and they might be small. Like for me, for example, going to get a coffee is a form of self-care, but yeah, it costs money. And no, not hundreds of dollars, but if I do it every day, sure, that adds up. So you do have to think about that. And some people are more able to make that financial sacrifice than others. Other things that could be roadblocks are physical or circumstantial limitations that you have in your life right now. So let's say you want to go somewhere to do your self-care, but you don't have a car. And, you don't necessarily want to Uber everywhere. Or maybe the weather is always bad where you live, so you can't go outside to do your self-care. Or maybe where you live, your living situation isn't great. So staying in your home is not always feasible to practice self-care. Maybe you live with your family and they're super loud, or you have really bad roommates who are toxic and make you feel uncomfortable. Whatever it may be, I think a lot of us have these circumstantial or physical situations that are incredibly valid roadblocks to actually practicing self-care, because genuinely, like, you cannot effectively take care of yourself if you're in an environment that isn't conducive to that. So if you are in one of those situations, I just want to apologize to you, and not because I did anything wrong, but like I just want to say I'm sorry you're going through that, because I can't imagine how hard that is to live with every day. We all have stuff going on in our lives, work, school, whatever, but then when you come home and you have other stuff going on, like, that's really hard. So I just want to validate you in that, if you do have situations going on. And I want you to know, like, you are just honestly so strong and brave for even listening to this episode, for trying to make a change in your life and trying to take care of yourself, because I know for many of us, that is the last thing we want to do when we're going through so much, is actually taking time for ourselves. Again, getting back to the exhaustion piece, it just feels like too much sometimes. So the fact that you're even here and listening, I think for anyone, that says a lot. And I think we should all be proud of ourselves for trying. Again, it all comes back to trying. Practice makes imperfect, as I say. So those are just a few examples of roadblocks. Again, think through your own life. I'm sure some of these sparked some thoughts and ideas of roadblocks you experience every day, or not even every day, but just occasionally. Those count too. But really making sure you know what those are, I think, is so important, because when you look back at that master list you created, you can really almost look at each thing with a clearer perspective once you know what's actually getting in your way. And you can almost kind of categorize things, right? Like, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but back to playing the saxophone. Like, if I want to play the saxophone as a self-care habit, if that's an item on my list, and I think about what's getting in my way for that, I can very quickly say, okay, financially, I don't know if that's smart for me right now to be buying or renting a saxophone just for fun. Like, I probably have to buy groceries and pay my rent. That would be good. So that's something. Living in an apartment, again, where I live, like, that's going to cause some issues. If I want to play the saxophone, I literally have to go somewhere. I could like go to my parents' house maybe and just annoy them with it. I could go outside and annoy nature. The poor little birds and bugs who would have to listen to my saxophone playing. Oof. I don't know if I could do it, because I would feel so bad for probably making them go deaf. I don't know. Do bugs have ears? This is a very important question. Let me know. I don't know if they could even hear me play the saxophone, but what I'm trying to say is that's just one example of an item on my list and a few roadblocks that I can say would get in the way. And that's because I just thought through these roadblocks and really thought through, okay, some things that go on in my life that, would make it hard. So I think having the roadblocks and having the list of things together will help you find so much clarity in what is getting in your way. And to get to my next point, really going through one by one is going to help you decide what sacrifices you're willing to make and what is actually feasible for you right now with your life. So, most likely, to some extent, you could probably think of a way to incorporate every single thing on your list into your life, not all at the same time, but if you look at them one by one, you could probably create an argument for how to make that work in your life. It may not be easy, it may create more stress, it may create more of a burden, and that's where we want to go next. Even though you could technically do any of these things, this is where I might differ from other content that's out there. I don't think you should do something just because you could do it. Like, I do this all the time where I try to, you know, convince myself, like, oh, well, even though it's going to take all of my mental sanity, I could do that thing and maybe it would make me feel better. I don't really know though. I'm kind of just doing it because I think I should do it. And a lot of times if I do it, it doesn't actually make a difference in my life. The burden that it takes, the stress that it takes to do that thing actually ends up being more than the benefit that I get from it. And so that's what I really want you to look at when you go through this list and you look at the sacrifices that each item would require. You have to be really honest with yourself and not just think about if you could do those things, but if it's worth it to you to do those things right now, and if it makes sense. Do the benefits of those things outweigh the initial costs? And in different seasons of your life, the answer is probably going to be different. So when you go through the list, yes, weigh the benefits, weigh the costs, weigh the sacrifices and roadblocks that you just thought of. But also think about where you're at in your life right now. And it sounds so obvious, but it's true. Like, if you are in a super busy period of your life with work or school, for example, then that is going to take up your time and going to take up more energy than maybe if you have a lighter period at work. If you've got stuff going on with your family or friendship drama or relationship drama going on, that is in itself going to create a roadblock that's going to take time and energy and make things harder. We all have stuff going on all the time. We all have issues. There's never going to be a time where we don't have any roadblocks getting in our way. But you know what I mean when I say sometimes life just feels more overwhelming than other times. I think it's really important right now to be honest with yourself on how life is feeling. And if you're in a really overwhelming, really hard time, do not choose a self-care practice that is going to add to that stress and add a burden. Again, self-care is supposed to make you feel better. And yes, sometimes it requires you to get out of your comfort zone and to use a little extra energy to do something and to take that initiative and get it done. But I still don't think it should be something that takes significant, strain on you. And maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but for self-care, I really don't think it should be that difficult. So if you're looking at things on the list and you're kind of like, oh, like I do want to do this, but it just takes a lot of sacrifice that I'm not sure I can make right now, then don't do it. Don't force yourself. I think this is where it's also really important to think back to some of the concepts I discussed previously around the different types of self-care habits. You can categorize self-care techniques into a ton of different categories. I really like kind of separating self-care into more mentally stimulating and relaxing habits, if that makes sense. So I discussed this a little bit last time, but certain self-care practices require you to maybe put in a little more mental effort or physical effort, like working out is an example. Creating something, doing an art project, even cooking or baking, like those can also be relaxing. But for many of us, when we are overwhelmed and stressed and going through a lot, they're going to feel more mentally stimulating or mentally draining, depending on what we're doing and what else is going on. So sometimes we like that. We like having the mental stimulation. We like making something new. We like challenging our brain in a new way and using a different part of our brain. But sometimes we just simply do not have the capacity to engage in a mentally stimulating self care habit. And we need something relaxing, like, to my point in my earlier episode, watching TV, watching a movie, scrolling TikTok, playing video games. I still think these have a place, even though no one else does. Sometimes we just don't have it in us to do anything more than that. And that can be enough in moderation, of course. So I think it's really important as you kind of go through your list and go through your roadblocks to also kind of think through what type of self care technique is right for you right now. Is it something that is more using your brain, more kind of creating something new? And trust me, it's not meant to be as mentally taxing and challenging as work or school or the things that take up your mind all day, every day. It's still supposed to be a break, but it's more so using your brain in a different way and doing something that kind of brings you energy and gets you into that flow state. Or if you're like, I literally can't even think about that right now, maybe it is something more relaxing that you need. Now, just so you know, I did say that my goal for us was to try a new self care technique. And so when I say relaxing techniques and I talk about, not even meditation, like watching TV, watching movies, scrolling, those are all things that I know all of us have done before. So I would challenge you to think outside the box here. I know those are the ones I'm using as examples, but meditating could be a relaxing technique. It could also be something that is work at first because your brain might not know how to do it. Reading could be relaxing if you're just reading a fun fictional book. Coloring could be something relaxing. You're not necessarily having to think super hard about it, but it's something that gets your mind away from the stress of your life. There are other relaxing techniques that you can also engage in, but I think my main point here is not to rehash what the techniques are, but to help you consider which type is right for you. And I think, again, having the list and having the roadblocks and kind of pairing them and seeing, okay, what is each one going to take and how does that feel for me? That's really going to help you determine overall, like, okay, is the theme here that I'm seeing that I need something a little more relaxing right now in my life? Or am I ready to take on something that is a little more fun, creative, mentally stimulating, however you want to word it? And as you kind of do that, you will find yourself narrowing things down. It really just comes down to the sacrifices you are able to make right now and the sacrifices you are willing to make right now. And that is going to lead you in a direction of either something that is mentally stimulating, something that's more relaxing. And then from there, you can kind of choose a specific technique to, again, try. I know I make it sound really easy. These are just the steps that have kind of worked for me. And I love a good step-by-step process, which is why I share. I do think it can be really overwhelming and intimidating to just, again, look at self-care as something you just have to figure out and start doing. So hopefully this helped a little bit in helping you find a process to choose something to try. But I know that once you choose, that doesn't mean you've actually implemented it yet. So I want to take these last few minutes of the episode to just briefly chat through some tips and tricks that have helped me find grace with myself and also enjoyment in the actual practice when implementing it. And I know you've probably heard this so much, but my biggest tip and the one that has worked for me the best is starting small. I think being an all or nothing person, my tendency is to either make something my entire personality or never think about it or do anything with it ever. And so when it comes to self-care, unfortunately, I used to look at it the same way. Like, okay, if I want to meditate, then I have to meditate 30 minutes every day on the dot, 9 p.m. before I go to bed. Like, I made it this whole thing where I put pressure on myself to have this ritual and to do it for a super long time. And like, that wasn't sustainable because I was going from 0 to 100. And that's what I would assume you're going to be going from as well, is from 0. You're not doing this right now. So going from 0 to making it your entire life is probably not going to be sustainable for you. It's already been hard enough for you to implement this into your life. So make sure you remember that and take little baby steps. You can get to that point if you want to be meditating 30 minutes a day. You can get to the point where you do that if you want. But trust me, from experience, that never works well when you just start straight away with going full force into it. It usually does not last very long. You learn to resent it, and then you stop doing it entirely, and then you never actually want to do it again because you associate it with work or with not having fun. So do not take my example. But that all goes to show why I have learned it's so important to start small. And when I say small, I mean, you don't even have to do this every day. You don't have to do it every week, depending on what it is. I mean, some things you probably can't do every day, even if you wanted to, but you shouldn't feel like you have to put it into your routine in a form of like every single day. You have to have it regardless of what your schedule is, because again, we all have life, we all have things going on. You don't have to do it for 30 minutes. You can do it for 5 minutes, right? Like just starting small in whatever way makes sense for you. I can't really give specifics because I don't know what you're wanting to do and what your life looks like, but I feel like you can probably get what I'm saying here. Small is ultimately what's going to be sustainable. And it's also going to be what's fun and enjoyable and actually reap you the benefits that you're looking for, because you're not going to be burning yourself out overdoing it. Of course, also feel free to make adjustments as you go. This is something I've learned. Like, for example, I used to wake up every morning and journal right away and just get my thoughts on paper, do my gratitude practice, all of those things. And I realized after a period of time that I was literally viewing it as a chore when I woke up to do that. And it was already hard enough for me to get out of bed at 5 a.m. Like, I'm, a tired girly. So honestly, I came to resent the practice of journaling, of doing gratitude, which sounds so bad. Like, I should be excited to be grateful for things. Like, I'm literally alive, so that's cool. But I was out here just struggling through it and not even reaping any benefit from it because it did feel like a chore. So when I noticed that, I decided, oh, no one is making me do this but me. Like, I can actually change it so that I'm doing it during a time of day that feels right for me, or like in a way that actually works, where I'm not just writing things because I feel like I have to feel a certain way. Like, if I'm not feeling that way, then I'm wasting my time. So I started doing it at night instead, before I went to bed. I started kind of redefining what I was writing. I wasn't like forcing myself to do a fancy journal prompt every single day, because some days I just wasn't feeling it. But it was more so the act of sitting down, getting my thoughts on paper at a time of day that worked for me. That's what really mattered and what actually gave me the benefits that I was looking for. It wasn't like super taxing on my mind with everything else I had going on, but it was enough to kind of get me into that Zen state, kind of relax me, honestly. Writing with my fun little Pilot gel pen is great. I love that time. I'm also going crazy. I need another sip of coffee. Okay. Now I just breathed straight into the microphone. I don't know what it is about this mic, but it's crazy. Oh, okay. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say, start small, number one. Number two, make adjustments as you go. Don't feel like you have to stay in the same routine forever. I would say for me, what's really helped is trying things at least a few times the same way, because we all have off days, right? There are some days where I thought, okay, maybe I'm just super tired at 5 a.m. today because I didn't get a lot of sleep. I had a stressful day yesterday. Maybe it's just an off day and I can get through this and I can do my journaling and it's fine. So I would say that at first, and I would try it a few times at that time, because I knew if I just based my decision off of one day, I could be missing out because we all have off days. But after a few days, after a few times of practicing whatever it is you're practicing, if you're not feeling great about it, if something feels off, you have full autonomy to change it and to make it work for you. And I think that ultimately is what's so exciting to me about self-care and life in general, honestly, is that we do, in some ways, have freedom. I know that's a very complicated concept, and we all have our roadblocks, but if you've chosen something that you think you can do, and the sacrifices are things you're willing and able to make, then you do have some level of choice of how you make that work in your life. Maybe you really only do have a certain time of day to do something, but you can choose how you form that habit in that time of day to work for you, right? Like you do have some level of choice and freedom in the choice you make, and that's exciting. So don't feel like anyone's forcing you to do it. Don't feel like there are these external pressures on you because I hate to say it, this is coming from someone who always thinks that people are judging me or thinking I need to be doing something. Most people really don't care, and most people are not even going to know that you're doing this. Unless, of course, you're telling them and posting on social media and making a big deal out of it, which I sometimes do. But even then, you shouldn't be doing it for that reason alone. It should be making you feel good, and no one cares. Like, no one cares what you're doing because they're all so focused on themselves. And that's what you have to remember about this too. You're doing it for yourself, so you make your own rules. These are just things that have helped me. Basically, the things that have helped me are making my own rules and not conforming to other people's rules. So you shouldn't conform to my rule of not making rules. Do what works for you. But that's an idea. That whole sentence, whole paragraph really just made no sense. So if you understood it, then wow, you're a genius. Your IQ must be crazy. Last thing I want to say, as you're kind of going through the process of not only choosing, but starting to implement these habits, is to remember what actually counts as self-care and hold yourself accountable to those metrics when you practice whatever you're trying. I mentioned these in my last episode. Before I kind of got into my master list, I wanted to anchor us all to what self-care really was in my eyes. You can, of course, change your own definition of it, but what I've always found to be self-care for me is something that hits on 4 different metrics. Number 1, it keeps me in the present moment rather than overthinking the future or the past. Number 2, it's something that I'm doing for myself and not due to some external pressure. Number 3, it feels enjoyable and not always like a chore. And number 4, I feel better after completing it than I felt before. If something I do hits all of those boxes, then I can be confident it's self-care. And if it doesn't, then I might want to rethink it. And again, we all have our off days, but if that's a pattern where one of these is just feeling off, then I know I might need to change something or change the practice altogether. So I would just say, as you go through, give yourself grace, of course, but if you do want to see if it's actually working and if it's something that is worth your while and you want something tangible to anchor to, I feel like these 4 metrics for me have really, really helped to hold me accountable and making sure that my self-care practices are actually doing me good and not harm. So that's where I'm going to leave you today. I know I kind of just raced through some of those at the end because I do have to get ready and go to this mysterious dinner. We'll see if I survive. Let's hope. I shouldn't even joke about that, but here we are. I joke about everything, so that's who I am. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to let me know. Leave that review, leave that rating. And in my next episode, my plan, as I've kind of gone through, how to choose, how to implement, you might think this series is over, but no. I want to kind of talk about how to implement self-care even in those situations where it feels like you can't. So a lot of things that get in our way of self-care, like work, like school, like family life, like relationships, those are situations where we feel like we can't practice self-care and mindfulness. And yet those are the situations where we probably could benefit from it the most. So while I've been talking about self-care so far as a practice that probably has to happen outside of those stressors of our life, my next episode, I really want to focus on how to also find self-care, self-love, and mindfulness even in those stressors that we all face every single day. So if that sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to follow along, get ready for that next Friday. And until then, I hope you do take some time to think through what self-care might look like to you. And maybe, who knows, you'll even choose a practice to kind of start trying either now or by the end of the series. If you do, I want to know what it is, so let me know. Anyway, that's all I have today, so enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, stay happy, stay hydrated, and I will see you next time. Bye! Thanks for tuning in to Genuine Gainz. I hope you found something that resonates with you today. Remember, wellness is a journey, not a destination, and it's all about finding what works best for you. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who might need a little inspiration. Let's keep making those genuine gains together, one step at a time. Until next time, take care of yourself.